Scott, come up, join us. I'm going to throw some softballs at you guys. We'll spend the next few minutes talking about this tremendous book project. Turn around, Scott. Say hello to Dave and Randy.
Hi, Dave.
Can you see some of that?
Hello, I'm going to imagine you there.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that's the Dave Mueli.
But how I got here, it was, gosh, this is 1993. I was a junior I was a kid, a junior at Columbia. And I sent letters out to pretty much every general manager in the New York Penn League. That was a league that I knew that I could fit into my school schedule before I went back to my senior year at Wesleyan. And I got a lovely, my first note was certainly from with Tom O'Reilly. And Tom actually, I think, gave me a call. I remember getting a call in my dorm room. And he just opened the doors to me, really welcomed me to come to Jamestown. And next thing I knew, it was spring of 1993. And I was moving into my apartment down the street from the ballpark. That's how I got to Jamestown for the first time.
So as you came to Jamestown, what was your impression of this league? That was the New York Penn League. It was part of the Jamestown Expos at that time.
That's right. My impression, my gosh, I think from from the perspective of a romantic 20-year-old thinking about the heroes that walk on the grass and what baseball I think probably meant to me as a kid, I romanticized it. And I think, I think Jamestown was such a like right out of central casting, beautiful little baseball town, and for me coming from, the New York area, I think I romanticized kind of the bucolic nature of Field of Dreams, small town baseball. But, once I got to know the players, the managers, the general managers, everybody behind it, then I started to see, oh my gosh, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was. And I could see the commitment that went into making it happen, how seriously, I will say how striking it was, how seriously the players took the game. It was not the sort of Bull Durham, romantic imagining of what I thought it would be. These guys were, professionals, athletes that took their job seriously. And I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from the way that they carried themselves and the way that they played. Again, all levels of that. So I think that was an initial eye-opener for me, for sure.
So, really, what you were doing was a paper for, was it your a master's paper or senior paper? What was that?
Yeah, this was just a senior thesis. It's amazing, Greg, because I still remember when you and I were chatting at the end of that season. And I don't remember exactly how we connected, but I remember sitting with you in the bleachers talking about, our shared interest in Jamestown baseball. At the time, this was a senior thesis. It was a big paper, essentially, and never would imagine that this would have been, a significant part of my early 20s, and then to come back around here in my late 40s and reconnect with you guys over this project has been it's been just beautiful. It's been great. But yes, at the time, to answer your question, it was essentially an extended paper, and that was my senior thesis. I did get honors out of it, so I recall that helping me graduate. But that was the initial impetus. Yeah.
Well, as I recall, just to fill in the historical blank of aspect, shortly thereafter, the Expos sold its interest to Burlington, Vermont. A whole series of events occurs where the Riches, Bob and Mindy Rich, through the leadership of Mike Bellani, who was here, we became part of the Rich Baseball Entertainment. Mike Bellani, as shy as he is, for those that don't know him, thought we had such a long history. Wouldn't it be great to have a history done on baseball here, which, sure, why not? Mike comes up with a great idea and wants everybody else to do it, and fortunately we did. And guys like Durwood Swanson, who's right behind me, became part of a group which gathered up information and thought, well, we might do a book, and that's where then you and I reconnected, saying, hey, you did such a great job on your paper wouldn't it be great to have the Pulitzer Prize winning book? And you actually took the bait. And I remember the whole process of feeding you with a whole lot of stuff, which then resulted in a book. Talk a little bit about how you put together this Across the Seams, because it's not your chronological book. It's really unique that way.
You know, what an amazing process that was, Greg. I mean, this all obviously brings back a lot of memories of just of a great collaboration with you and the team. And I can't see everybody in there, but Durwood, my gosh, it's been a long time. And of course, you know, I would get these boxes of faxes and copies, photocopies, some handwritten notes, I recall, a lot of microfilm copies. I seem to remember a lot of Jamestown Post-Journal news articles. And I recall sitting in my apartment in New York, you know, poring over the boxes that you'd send me year by year. I remember there, you know, each milk crate, they were either banker boxes. There were some banker boxes, but I think they ended up in milk crates on my end. And poured over it and tried to understand what had happened. I mean, you know, from me, you know, I didn't grow up with these stories, so all of these names were, for the most part, new to me. And you know, I seem to remember we assumed that we were going to be telling the story starting in the late 30s and the early 40s, and then as time went on, then we started reaching back even deeper, and those stories were very compelling to me to just see what a long reach baseball has in your town. But you know, from my perspective, I remember getting your shipments, getting a lot of faxes. I seem to remember we had a fax set up, and the faxes would come across. And you know, I would ask humbly, you know, does anyone know anything about whatever player that was or whatever year that was? And then your team, just dogged and tenacious as it was, just kept ripping out new material and sending it to me. And I was just trying to find a through line. You know, I was always trying to find the stories in there. That was always my goal.
And you did it incredibly well, and as I recall, resulted in a book entitled Across the Seams, which took us through the first year, 1994, of the Jamestown Jammers. Then I must tell you one quick vignette, which is embarrassing for me, perhaps, but also for Russ Dietrich, because you can't find anything to embarrass Russ Dietrich. So let me tell the story. It's important, because this was part of the book, and we gathered all that information, all those oral histories, all the hot stove league luncheons, and all we filmed and sent videos and movies and all that stuff to you, Dave, because we wanted you to sort it out. We certainly did not. And the guy who sort of put all that together to make sure that happened was Russ. And I couldn't get Russ down at all to be interviewed. Now, you can't do a book on the history of professional baseball in Jamestown without Russ Dietrich. And so finally, one day, I'll remember this because I'm embarrassed at having say this, but I looked at Russ, and you can't say this. I go, Russ, what the hell? We got to sit down and interview you. Now, you can't say that word to Russ Dietrich. He's iconic. He's the man. Well, the next Saturday morning, he came with repentance, perhaps, two donuts, 2 cups of coffee, came to my office. I asked him one question. Half an hour later, we got to the second question. He was finally ready for that, which we needed, David, for the book was the Russ Dietrich story. The book comes, and then we have the big rollout. We have a night to remember, and we invited back virtually everybody who was alive and in the book. And I remember you coming here, and it was a great evening, 3 hours. It was a 3-hour baseball fest.
That was quite a night. That was it was as billed a night to remember. That was a really memorable time. I remember actually, I was lucky enough, my wife was able to come up, and actually, I think my folks came too, and it was a really beautiful night that you all put together. I was thrilled to be a part of it.
We had Mrs. Nellie Fox. We had a lot of folks who are in the book, which ultimately then came to the Across the Seams. And just one final postscript. As you recall, David, we were sweating BBs because the book was planned to be there that time, and it came a day late. It came a day late after the event, so we had the big scramble afterwards to get the books around. David, I think you're on mute, or you got so excited we can't hear you. There we go. Now I got it. You're good. You're good. Okay. You were good. David, you might.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we're good.
Am I back?
Yeah,
All right.
we're back, good.
Yes, I do recall we had a little hiccup there at the end. I remember a lot of frantic calls but I do remember it all kind of working out. It came, I believe, it arrived the next day for the ballpark celebration. Then, right?
Exactly.
Because then we did a signing at the ballpark, and so that worked out kind of nice. There's a little more drama to it, so that wasn't so bad.
It was. We got a chance to see everybody again. Perfect. But the good news tonight at our book launch, today we have the book. And the book has your reprinted across the seams, which, by the way, if you can't get it, it was out of print about the minute it was available. And you have to go on eBay for about $100. And David, even you and I won't pay that much for it. So now you can, for a lot less, you can buy this.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to segue over to Scott Kindberg and Rrandy Anderson. Both of them have been intimately involved in our Jamestown Tarp Skunks, Jamestown Community Baseball LLC. And it was really George Carlo, one of our investors, who came up with the idea of saying, what are you about reprinting David's book, because nobody can get it? And I thought, well, great idea. I called you. You said, sure, why not? You were a good sport. And then we said, how are we going to take this and make it current? And then I reached out to Rrandy Anderson, Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, and take it from there, Rrandy.
Well, when you have a big project like that, you just call Scott. And I say, Scott, I got a big problem here. Greg wants this book done, and we got to fill in a lot of years, and you're the only guy that can do this. And Scott, what happened then?
Well, then I relied on my former boss and good friend, the late Jim Riggs. Jim was sports editor at the Post-Journal from 1977 until his retirement in 2014, and he covered professional baseball here from 1977 until his retirement. And fortunately, Jim clipped out every article, every column that he ever wrote. Now imagine how many that is over the course of time. And there's no way that I could have written a book like Dave did, given my other professional responsibilities. So I think Rrandy was the one who suggested, well, since Jim's stuff is all cataloged, why don't we see what we can find that relates to his coverage of the Expos and then the Jammers. Well, I guess it was just the Jammers from 95 through 2014, and then myself and my staff at the Post-Journal picked up the Collegiate Woodbat League from 2015 to the present. So that's how we acquired all the material, frankly, were stories that had appeared in the Post-Journal. And when you see the book, you'll notice that almost all of those articles from that time were written by Jim, and that really makes me proud that even though he's no longer physically here, his presence in that book is forever.
What was the surprise, Scott? You had to try to bridge 25 years as you went back and just looking at the history of baseball here in Dietrich Park. Was there a little surprise or a reminiscence that you'd forgotten about?
Well, actually, the thing that you mentioned, Russ Dietrich, Mr. Baseball, and how he was reticent to sit down and chat with you. Well, the thing that I remember most, actually, was a story that I did on the last day of the 2014 season, and I sat at the pavilion there at Dietrich Park, and we chatted about Russ's feelings about this being the last likely the last professional baseball played in Jamestown. And he literally gave me almost a walking tour of the ballpark and things that he remembered, not just in recent years, but his trips to the ballpark with his dad, and watching guys like Claire Hammond and Kenny Martin and George Parsons and Jack Fulford play games at the ballpark. And so it was literal, and then he would, oh yeah, I sat up here. He had a favorite spot that he would sit in the bleachers. So it was literally a history lesson, and that's what I remember. And it was kind of melancholy too, because it was a realization that the minor league baseball operation wasn't going to be here any longer. But, and as only Russ can, he so eloquently said there will be baseball on this grass again. And then 2 months later, the announcement was made that the Wood Bat League would be coming here. So that's actually, I reread that this morning just to kind of refresh my memory, and that's what I remember the most. It was kind of a somber day that day, and you know, my cousin Tim Kindberg, who's up there in the seats, he and I played catch, you know, and after the game, and you know, it was just, and Russ, I think, threw a couple left-handed throws as well. So it was just a real memorable experience that day. So I think of all the things personally that impacted me the most, but Jim Riggs had a lot of really poignant stuff. You know, he wrote 2 columns, one a couple days after Dwight Lowry passed away, and then on the 1-year anniversary. And I mean, obviously I remember that tragic day, but I had forgotten about, you know, how Jim experienced it all. I think Mike Ferguson called Jim at 3 a.m. Because Jim would, in those days we were an afternoon paper, and so Jim would come in the office about 3 a.m. and you know, you don't get calls at 3 a.m., and if you do, it's usually not good news, and sadly, that was the case that day. And so Jim wrote about that, too. So those are a couple of things that I remember most and will always remember.
Well, I must say, on the Dwight Lowry piece by Jim, I read that when I got the book, and I teared up. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so well written, and I suspect when this crowd behind me reads it, they'll have the same reaction. Editorially, Randy, you read it one or 2 times. So you read Dave's, Dave read Dave's. Tell about the process. This was not just simply getting the manuscript, which Dave so graciously provided to us. You had to read it. There was some editing, not only that, but also flow of the book, the look of the book. How did that all come together?
Well, it truly was a team approach, Greg. We had so many players involved, and everybody had to do their part in order to make this book happen, starting with Dave and his daughter. His daughter was a proofreader of the book. Think about, we started when Dave was just a college kid, and now we're at a point where he's got a daughter who's proofreading his work. So we start with Dave and his daughter for all the work that they did on it. Before I get any farther, though, Greg, I do want to give a shout out to the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation. Tori Ergang and her staff at the Community Foundation gave a grant to the Sports Hall of Fame to allow us to take this project on and to pay for the printing and so on. So a shout out to Tori and the Community Foundation. But again, that team, again, I guess you call, yeah, Tori was on the team, sure. But David and his daughter, Scott for sure. Another key person in this whole thing was Wally Hucknall and Marcia Kessler-Daly. Those 2 folks were also proofreaders in the book. Because as David knows, after you read a piece several times, pretty soon you can't see the mistakes because they just go into your head and they're there. So you need fresh eyes on it all the time. My wife Heidi took a look at the book a couple of times. So again, a huge team that made this happen. But the real key players, other than Dave and Scott, again, Faulkner Printing, Lisa Short spent, well, Jim Roach would know how many hours she's spent on this book because he's got her time card, but it was outrageous, the amount of time that she spent in organizing the book. The title of the book, Our Game, that's David Mueli's idea. So his original title, Across the Seams, and now he gave us the new title. So again, a shout out to David. Again, I was just kind of the guy who was making sure all the pieces were going in the right direction, but the real work was done by David and Scott.
One aspect that was changed somewhat in the book was we eliminated the pictures of the players and we included pictures of non-players. What was the basis of that decision?
The photos in the book are photos of people who I think had a tremendous impact on keeping baseball in our community from, well, as you called it, 1866 clear up to 2020. And these are community people for the most part that had key roles. Much like the current iteration of the Tarp Skunks is all about community baseball, the photos in this book are from people in our community that kept baseball alive.
Your daughter read the book. Your daughter edited the book. Your daughter, no doubt, commented on the book. I'd be curious to see what a 16-year-old thought of her dad's book.
You know, what a dreamy situation this was. It's funny, you know, we were working on this. The timing was really quite something. I'd be working on this in March and April and May, you know, so we were early COVID days, and we here, we're in Boston, and we were, you know, we're still, you know, fairly locked down, but I mean, we were really, really locked down back in March, April, May. And having this project to work on with my daughter was really quite an experience. She, you know, I think what she found was not being you know, a huge baseball fan. She's a Red Sox fan, of course, and so she likes her. She's got her tribal connection to the Red Sox. She's not a big baseball fan in general, certainly not a baseball historian. But, you know, to pick up on what Rrandy said, I think Lucia is my daughter. I think actually Lucia picked up on the same thing that we did, which is that really the through line of the whole story is this tremendous commitment to community. And I think it was inspiring for her. I think it was very inspiring for her to see that, you know, when things are going smoothly, then the stories are about the players and the game on the field. But then there's these plastic periods. There's these really important moments like, Scott, you know, your beautiful 2014 piece. I wanted to comment on that. I'm glad you brought it up because I thought just reconnecting with Russ through that piece was just great. And, you know, those are the periods. 2014, those happened earlier in time. You know, there's 5 or 6 or 7 really key periods. And it sounds to me like you're in one of them now, you know, where the community pulls together and decides this is important. This is something that we're going to continue to have be a priority. And, you know, I thought it would be fun if Lucia were on here with us, but to put words in her mouth, I think she was most moved by the commitment to continue to build community through baseball. It's a remarkable story. Not every town has this story. And I think that was the through line that she followed for sure.
David, Maida, I don't want to let you get away without talking a little bit. You have a Chautauqua connection, Chautauqua Institution connection with a friend of yours. And
yeah, small world, right?
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, you know, in my time after, you know, working on this book with you all, you know, I had gone to grad school for journalism, but I think somewhere in there, I came to the realization I was not going to spend the rest of my career writing nonfiction. And so I actually, I have been spending the last 25 years writing television and plays. And so in my travels, one of my plays that I wrote, an early reading that we did was in LA with a wonderful actor named Andrew Borba, who I understand is artistic director at Chautauqua Rep. So small world, this all takes me to LA. And you know, even weirder, you know, it was about that time that I lived in Venice, out in Venice Beach, out in west side of LA. Saw Greg Mueli Jr. in a play at the Pacific Residence Theater. He was in an Edward Albee play. And, you know, I saw the program. I said, Greg Mueli Jr., you got to be kidding me. This is I know him. Talked to him a little bit after the play out in, you know, under the stars in Venice Beach, one of those weird connections. But Jamestown reaches beyond, for sure. The alumni network is out there.
But you also wrote a play dealing with, I think, was it the Holocaust? It had sort of a Jackson-esque feeling to it. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, isn't that fascinating, right? I mean, the way that our lives have gone a little bit in parallel, Greg. Yeah, be glad to. I was writing for television. I was writing for a show called Veronica Mars. This is about 10 years ago, longer, almost 15 now. And a producer came to me and asked if I might be interested in a commission to write a play. And she said, "Do you know much about the David Irving, Deborah Lipstadt Holocaust denial trial that took place in London in 2000?" And I said, "A little bit. You know, I'd read some headlines, but I ended up taking the commission and spending a tremendous amount of energy over this last period of life, looking to get this play, in front of people. So I wrote this play based on the events of this libel trial and the fight on both sides and the issues that are involved. There's a lot of deep issues about libel that have nothing to do with Jamestown baseball. But you asked, simply it's a historical play based on the trial. And that is one of the plays that I had been developing.
Sounds like something we're going to have to find a place here. We have a nice stage here, Dave.
I would love to connect with you on that as well. It's always a pleasure to work with you on. I'd work out with you on any project, Greg. You tell me where to go next.
Well, trust me, there's a room full of people who said that and variously regret it. So,
speaking just to Shaman, I just want to say, because I don't know if I'm going to get this chance again, but Rrandy and Scott, a total pleasure working with you guys. I really want to give them credit. And obviously, Scott, your part of the book was beautiful, and it really gave me a full scope of the last 25 years. I don't know how else I would have gotten up to speed. And so, it was a great job. And Rrandy, who I worked with closely, I have to say, I think the willingness to really stay with this project and get it right. It was really great to take a project to completion. I really felt like we left it all out on the field together, and it was just a pleasure to be a part of it. I know how much back office work there was, but I want to give specific credit to sticking with the index. I think that's probably something that not everyone's going to fully appreciate, but the inclusion of the index was just a tremendous effort. My daughter was in part to thank for that. Rrandy, of course, you and your crew were a big part of that too, but I think it makes the book a really valuable chronicle and a historical record. So I'm glad we did it. I know it was a massive effort, but hats off to you for the commitment to just take this thing to the end. So I think we got a beautiful work that will be lovely up on our bookshelf for a long, long time. So congratulations.
Indeed. Just a postscript as a payback on the index that Rrandy put together. He's noted more times than Russ Dietrich, so I just want you to know he took full advantage of the opportunity. If I'm doing an index, I'm talking about me. So, no, just kidding. I was just kidding. So as we kind of draw closer to this book launch, and by the way, everybody, it's here, and I suspect it will last about as long as the Across the Seams. So David, hopefully, I'm glad you got your copy, because otherwise everybody will have to, if you don't buy them soon, it'll go on eBay. The final words, as we kind of wrap up, I'm just going to go around the corner. Scott, final word on the book?
Well, what I kind of brings closure to me in some respects, because my initial contact with baseball was when my late father would take me to see I think there was Falcons then, and he knew Frank Hyde, the longtime sports editor, who was actually, he was the chronicler of all things baseball prior to Jim Riggs taking over the beat in 1977. Frank covered the baseball team from 45 until probably 70, when Jim took over. So Frank was there until the mid-70s. So when my dad would take me to games, and then he'd say, well, we got to go up and see somebody in the press box. And that was Frank Hyde. So then fast forward a number of years, and I went up to the press box to see Jim Riggs. Then ultimately, Jim hired me to join him in the winter of 1980, or December of 1983, and I've been there ever since. So I've had tremendous role models, but it seems like it was baseball that drew me to both of those gentlemen initially. And, you know, to be able to write about baseball and have connection to both of those great men, that's something that I'll always remember.
Randy, you're being the president of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame. The Sports Hall of Fame has, in fact, many of its early inductees as well as others who are all kind of baseball connected.
That's why I felt the need to get involved in this project, Greg. Our guys are in that book, and that's our job at the Sports Hall of Fame, is to honor and preserve the sports legacy of Chautauqua County, and nothing says it better than the history of baseball.
And David, I'll give you the next to last word because inevitably I'll have the last word. David, what's your sense of it here?
Well, you know, look, more than anything, I think working on this project in this time and having the perspective of someone outside of Jamestown, I think given the polarization, the tribalism of this and this key place that our country is in right now, that I feel powerfully this sense of fraying of the social fabric. It was so striking to not only see the larger story of Jamestown baseball over this period of time since 1866, and see that at every step there were people who stepped in and wove the fabric of the social construct together, but that this continues. And then to do that actually with you guys this year, I think we saw sort of the macro and the micro, that this is what brings a group of folks together on a Saturday morning. It just continues to be, I think this is a story that's about more than just the game on the field in Jamestown right now. I think what you have all been a part of, that continuum that you're on, is crucial and essential. And I think it's a playbook. I think this is a real playbook for other folks in other towns committing to other projects and things that are bigger than themselves. So, you know, it's just been a pleasure to be a part of it. So I hope to be back in a room like this in 25 years. We'll catch up on the next chapter.
You might want to start without me.
Well, we look forward to having you and your daughter and family here soon when COVID permits, and we'll throw out the first pitch. And even as I wrap up here, I'm flashing my own life story of an arc where I played Little League Baseball on a team with the grandson of Hugh Bedient, who was out there in right center field watching us with his hat on. I played Babe Ruth. My manager was Johnny Newman, and I went to school with two of the sons of early baseball players in the form of Johnny Pollock and Bob Schmidt, who were Johnny Pollock and Dick Schmidt's children, and it just continues on thereafter in so many other forms or fashions. I can't thank all three of you enough for this opportunity to talk a little bit about this book launch entitled Our Game, From Unknowns to the Tarp Skunks, 155 years and counting of baseball in Jamestown, New York. And it would not have happened without a David Mueli, a Scott Kindberg, Randy Anderson, and all the players that were previously mentioned. So thanks, one and all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.